He did the mash.
He did the monster mash.
The monster mash.
It was a graveyard
He
smash.
did the mash.
It caught on.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a special Halloween-themed episode of Thomas Top 10s. I'm MultiGreenThunder.
And I'm MasterOfTheLemons, aka Lemmy.
And today, I'm really excited for this one, actually, because Halloween-themed Thomas stuff is kind of right up my alley. I love doing Halloween-themed videos and stuff like that, so the fact that we're doing an episode like this is really cool.
The Halloween-themed stuff is one of the coolest little kind of subsections of being a Thomas fan, where it's like, you know,
I know, right?
Thomas has always had two very special kind of themed types of episodes, where it's had these kind of spooky Halloween episodes, and it's got Christmas episodes.
But never both.
No, never both. I wonder why that is.
Tim Burton, get on it!
It's almost like it's difficult to make a story that spans, like, several months. But anyway, you know, around Halloween, it's always cool being a Thomas fan, because, like, I always try to watch the kind of more spooky Halloween stuff.
And I'd like to remind the viewers that these are going to be our top 5 favorite spooky episodes, not necessarily our top 5 favorite Halloween episodes, because if we're going by Halloween episodes, we literally only have like 2 episodes.
Yeah, there's like only 2 episodes that take place on Halloween, but there's like, I'd say like 9 or 10 episodes that I could call Halloween episodes, as in like episodes that you can watch around Halloween and it feels right. You know, it's like, it fits the season, gets you in the mood, it's festive. You know?
Exactly. Like, say you want to really get into the Halloween spirit, like you pop in the Thomas Halloween DVD and you want to watch all the spooky episodes, you know, Tobys Discovery, Stephanie Gets Lost, and Ghost Train, and frickin' Diesel's Devilish Deed, and Thomas Gets Tricked.
Diesel's Devilish Deed.
Okay, alright, okay, before we get into our top 5 rants, we're dedicating a special little portion to rant about this release. I love this release, honestly. It has some great episodes, but this release doesn't make any sense. Okay, first up,
He's talking about Thomas's Halloween adventures, by the way.
Yes, you guys know what I mean, the Halloween DVD. They literally, why is Thomas Gets Tricked scary?
They put Thomas Gets Tricked and Diesel's Devilish Deed on there. They renamed it to Diesel's Devilish Deed so they could get away with it. And they did not put Halloween on that release.
And yet Emily's on the cover and she doesn't appear in any episodes.
Oh, it's truly tragic.
It literally has Thomas and Emily on the cover. And why rename an episode? You have so many scary episodes to choose from, and you rename Diesel's DVD?
I love how we're so far past the era where DVDs were even relevant, and yet we're still grieving the missing episodes on those releases from when we were younger.
Well, Halloween's a good time to grieve.
Like, we can watch every single one of these episodes on YouTube, but we're just mad that they're not on a specific release that we're probably never going to watch.
I love yelling at people who made a DVD like 10 years ago, if not longer.
The thing is, making a DVD, the work's already done for you. You just gotta throw the stuff on there. It's choosing the stuff.
And they couldn't even do that.
I know. It's like, it's the easiest part, and you couldn't put the right stuff on there. Okay, we need to get into our top 5.
All right,
we can't talk about this anymore.
By the time we get to this list, it's gonna be Thanksgiving, so let's go ahead and get right into this thing. Lemmy, what's your number 5?
All right. My number 5 is Rusty and the Boulder. And this one, I mean it's like implying that the quarry is like cursed. I mean, That's a big deal. Like, they never have done that before. There's always been some explanation. You know, we've always had, like, you know, spooky stories like, you know, like say in Ghost Train, you know, where Percy pretends to be a ghost. But the implication was always that ghosts aren't real, right? And then that episode... Yeah, that episode actually implies, like, a curse, and, like, maybe that boulder is possessed. And
what
like,
would have happened if they kept working in that quarry after the fact? Like, would something else have, like, would Thumper have become possessed and tried attacking them or something?
Oh, God. That would be really scary for Thumper, too. That would be like...
You see, oh my, so Tom Hat's like in his bed with his wife, you know, they're about to go to bed, and you just see Thumper smashing through the wall.
god! How fast is he that he can get there? Like,
he's like towering over them. You hear like a mechanical sound. He's just kind of hopping around a little bit as he treads
I don't
along.
even know. I mean, it depends on how many stories their house has. If they're on like the second story, I mean, I guess he could collapse. He could collapse the house, but he couldn't really get up there unless he like.
Not so tough now, are ya?
Come and get me, Thumper. You can't get me. Thumper's just like, I'm on
he's
my
like,
way.
I'm pretty like throwing like like Shazam of course has like all this fancy stuff. It sounds like throwing like a fine class wine bottle at him or something. That's from my great grandpappy, don't you know?
Oh my god. But yeah, so basically, you know, I think it's a really cool concept. It's really spooky. Because that episode, there's almost always an explanation in the other episodes. Like, you know what's going on. Eventually, it gets explained at the end and everything's okay. And that's like the one episode I can think of where it's left up in the air. They just get the heck out of that quarry as soon as they can because they realize that that they don't know what's going on there. And they never find out.
Yeah,
they just
that's something I guess I've never... As much as I adore that episode, I never really think about, like, you know, why is this stuff happening?
Yeah. That's the creepy part. There's no answer. It's a lot more of an X-Files-y type of ending, where it's like, things don't fully get explained. You know, it's acknowledged, everyone knows, hey, there's some sort of weird business going on over here, but let's just back away and not deal with it, because this is something we're not supposed to deal with. This is something we're not supposed to mess with. So I think that's a really cool idea, and that's why it's my number 5.
That's a great pick. Now I'm going to go with something far, far less scary. Number 5 is a classic, Thomas Percy and the Dragon. This episode is probably one of the most unique ones of the whole series. I'm going to praise pretty much every episode for their aesthetic, but I mean, this episode just has such unique theming. You have, I love the Asian influence of, like, the Chinese dragon and such. Like,
yeah, that's a really cool idea. I've always just taken that for granted. Like, yeah, of course there's a Chinese dragon on Sodor, but, like, I mean, when I think about it, it's like, well, that's a totally different, like, that's not a part of British culture. That's from China. And that's a really cool idea. Yeah,
we usually didn't see that type of stuff in the series at this point. And not to mention, that also goes to show with the music. This episode, like... guys, go back and listen to the music. Like, some of the way they influence some Asian influence into the music, too. I mean, and make it eerie and creepy and dramatic. Like, I love the cue when the Chinese dragon, like, Percy's first spots, and it's like, da-da-da-dun, da-da-da-dun. It's so... it's amazing.
It's like the whole thing's from Percy's perspective, or a lot of it is. And it's like we're feeling what he's feeling. And they do a really good job of that, where really it's not that scary because we know that it's just like a paper dragon on a flat
But yet they somehow still make it intimidating, which is really well done. It's a good achievement here.
Alright, so my number 4 is Halloween. I really love this episode because I think...
That doesn't count.
So
come back when you have a real list.
so I think the new series just had some really amazing, like, the best Thomas and Emily episodes in the whole series were definitely in the new series. And really the best Emily episodes in general. I agree. I love when Emily is this pretentious, arrogant character, because she matches Thomas so well. Because the thing is, they're both equally arrogant, have equally inflated egos. And so when you put them both in a scary situation where they both want to prove that they're fearless, it's so fun to watch, because they're in this competition with each other. I'm the bravest. No, I'm the bravest. No, I'm the bravest.
Thomas knows what must be done, yet Emily knows best.
Yes. And it's like, I love that scene where they're puffing along and the narrator says something like, they were both very proud of being brave or whatever. And they're both grinning so widely. And it's just like, they're just stroking their own egos so hard. They're both like, yeah, we're the best. We're nothing like Percy. We're so brave. We're so cool. And then, and you just watch them and you're like, come on, you two are unbelievable. And so it's so fun to watch that all come crashing down when they go to the smelters, and really they find out that they're cowards and that they're actually, they've just been building themselves up this whole time. But they're no more fearless than Percy is. You know, they're scared too. It's just that they're not.
If anything, Percy is arguably braver.
Yeah, because the thing is, Percy actually says it. Percy's actually honest, but the two of them, oh no, we're the bravest around. You know, we're far better than you are. And they you know, they chuckle and laugh and clink their champagne glasses and then they
I'm picturing them like they both have like a tanker that's full of champagne, and they just kind of ram it into each other like it's one good turn or something.
But, like, it's that type of vibe where it's, like, you can just tell the two of them are, like, they feel like they're part of high society, and they're looking down on Percy, and they're like, wow, we are so cool. And then they go to the smelters, and it all comes crashing down, and it's hilarious to watch, because they really deserved it.
One thing I'd like to say on the episode before I get into mine is that Halloween didn't make my list, but I want to say the visuals, they're so freaking
It's gorgeous.
God.
You know this one shot I really love? This episode, I think it's the only one where we see that the Smelters has a turntable. And it's such a cool thing. Like, I love that idea that the Smelters has a turntable in there.
I forgot about that. I still can't even remember. I have to look at that up.
It's the coolest thing. Emily turns around on it, and then the sheet falls on her. It's so cool. I love it.
It's also nice to get see Ari and Bert in a night setting again.
Yeah, and it's like, and just in general, you know, they're always fun, and they're the perfect fit for this situation. So I love that episode so much.
Okay, so my number 4 is I'll take your Halloween and one up you. I got Stepney Gets Lost, the one that, you know,
the one that got away.
The one that, yeah, he did get away. He got lost. In fact, that was really bad. But you know, at this point in the series, you know, we had little mishaps with like maybe this person's a ghost, or oh no, the mind's cursed. But you know what, the engine's
maybe this person's a ghost. Oh, yeah. Maybe the mind's cursed.
Okay, this is kind of
cool.
around the middle, etc. Like, we're used to this stuff, and we've heard a lot about, you know, engines getting scrapped and stuff. But this is the first time we actually get to feel the threat of scrap, that blowtorch and everything.
Like, that's the thing. It's not like, because the thing is, other engines getting scrapped, it's just this huge system that's causing that, right? With modernization and everything. It's not like individual characters responsible. Diesel can brag all he wants about Diesel's being superior, but he's not the one specifically causing engines to get scrapped. But this episode, it's legitimately just Ari and Bert's prejudice and hatred for steam engines luring Stepney in and scrapping him illegally. That's really scary.
How terrifying is this episode, too? Because Stepney was literally somewhere he wasn't supposed to be. It's a foggy night, and he could have just vanished off the charts and no one knew what happened to him. That very well could have happened.
I know.
Literally what makes the whole episode is literally like the last minute or two of this episode. Not only do we get the introduction to one of the best villainish characters in the series, like, Ari and Bert are great, and I love them after the fact, but they've never topped their initial appearance. That voice Baldwin gave them, and then the ominous thing, it was a case I feel like where less was more. They were threatening, and they were literally death on wheels. And then you have that claw. I'm not quite sure what they were going to do with that claw, but
I think, to be totally honest, I think the plan was to drop Stepney. I think what David Mitton was picturing is you're going to drop Stepney in a big vat of molten liquid, and that's going to work somehow.
Yeah.
And that's ridiculous. You cut an engine up piece by piece and then melt those little parts down. You don't just drop an engine in a big vat. But that's...
Now, Lemmy's little theory is that they were actually just going to pick him up and put him, like, off the track.
Yeah, like, they just pick him up off the tracks and then toss him onto, like, a big scrap heap, and he's, like, sits there for a while and rusts.
Don't tell the viewers that.
That would be a lot better than dropping him in... Because if you just drop him in... Not all the metal's the same, right? Some of it's brass, some of it's, steel, some of it... You can't just drop it in a vat of liquid like that.
And one more thing I'd like to say on this episode real quick is that I love the little callback to Rusty to the rescue, where somehow goes, saving for scrap is becoming a habit, Stepney. Please stop it.
I love that. That's fantastic.
It's also perhaps one of my favorite Sir Tom Hat moments in the show. It's very cleverly written, and
Yeah, no, it was really cool. It's like it's one of his best moments, I think, because it's like we see him. We know that he cares about the engines and saves them from scrap all the time, but that's a moment where he's like the one who presses the button to stop the thing. It's like in the music where it's like it's like it's so it's just
Here
like
I come to save the day.
it's almost like he just came in strolling in with a cane, and he's just like, not on my watch, and
He pushes the button with the cane.
it's just the coolest thing. So I do love that. So my number 3 is Stepney Gets Lost.
Continue!
Yes, you will continue. So my thoughts on it mirror your thoughts a lot. But what I have to say about it is, the thing is, it's really scary because like we identify with Stepney in that story, right? He's our protagonist. And he feels so small and helpless in this big open countryside filled with mist. And then when these two diesels come along and take him, it's like he's so tiny. There's nothing he can do. And I love how Bert is like the muscle and Aries like Aries just like he's just like buffering Bert, and then Bert just does it. Like it's he doesn't even worry about the idea of Stepney being able to escape isn't even like brought up. It's like no, they just can take it.
Bye, Stepney.
He's totally helpless. His crew is gone, and even if they were there, he's this tiny little engine. It's terrifying, right? And especially considering the fame that Stepney has and how important he is as an engine. If you go with the TV series canon of him being owned by the Northwestern Railway, then none of this applies. But if you go with the real-life history of him being one of the most famous steam engines in preservation, then it's really negligent for the Northwestern Railway to let this happen to this engine that is visiting.
Imagine if he actually was scrapped. Imagine how many people would be angry.
And the scary thing is, it's so clearly like between steam engines and diesel engines what you would call a hate crime. Because, it's these diesels, they must have been planning this for weeks, months in advance. They knew Stepney was coming, they knew which line he was going to come down, and they intentionally diverted him to his death. They're like, okay, if we're going to get any engine, we're going to get Stepney. Because Stepney, just because he's so famous, and he's a symbol for steam engines everywhere, while Ari and Bert are trying to oppress the steam engines and tell them they're worthless and scrap them all, Stepney's rising them all up and telling them, no, you're worth something, and even a little engine like me can do big things, and I'll prove it to all of you by becoming so famous and by surviving scrap, right? And so he's a symbol of preservation. So, of course they want to knock him down. Of course they want to get rid of him and send a message and terrify all those steam engines by taking Stepney out. It's terrifying. It's so evil and cruel. And the idea of Stepney, of all engines being scrapped, is scary. So I really love that idea. I think it's really cool. And I have to say, Ari and Bert, and the smelters in general, neither of them has looked better than it did in this one episode.
Agreed.
I love the dirty, kind of mustardy yellow, that's brownish yellow that they are, that's really weathered, and the green is almost like a gray because it's so weathered. I love that look, right?
Anyways, let's get to my number 3 is, I freaking love this episode. Duncan Gets Spooked.
I knew you were going to put this on here.
I got a fanboy about this episode some more. Well, first of all, let me talk about how dark this episode already is. It begins with a fantastic crash with the freight cars when they decide to break away, and they die. And they even allude to it in the episode because, the freight cars are going to come back to haunt you. So, yeah, those trucks are freaking dead. I hope you enjoy your Thomas episode, little Timmy. But, yeah, they die. And then Rusty tells the story of an engine that also dies. And it's a really fascinating story where it just loses control and he falls. And, yeesh, oh my god, the music is so scary. But I want to talk a bit about how, not only is this just such beautiful cinematography here where you could even just show it without having to say very little, and the music will speak for itself. But what I want to say also is that, like I said when I was young, this episode didn't scare me, intrigue me. If you want to talk about a scary episode, let's talk about freaking tenders and turntables. That episode is freaking terrifying. In my mind as a kid, I had in my mind that Gordon was out to get James, and he was watching James spin around the turntable and watching his torment. That episode is the real number 1 right here.
All the moments that terrified me as a kid were not meant to be scary.
Hey, let's be honest here. The scariest thing ever in the show is in the Troublesome Trucks music video where they have that close-up on that one truck and it pounces. That thing is terrifying.
How did they not think that was going to scare kids? But I fully agree with you on Duncan Gets Spooked, where it's like it always intrigued me too. I wanted to know that engine's story, like who were they, right? You know, I mean, what is their history? Why are they? When were they on this railway? You know, I mean,
and something I'd like to bring up too, real quick, actually, is that I got to give mad props to this show in the Halloween episodes, where whenever they have a ghost character, they always reuse an existing character. Percy's ghostly trick, they reused Percy. For this episode, they used Scarloey. Later would use Donald or Douglas in Scaredy Engines, and they would also use a Gordon in Halloween. The fact that they reused a character and still got off such a creepy effect is really admirable.
Yeah, no, they did a really good job with that, where it never really felt like wrong, and also it helps that it's pretty well established that that these engines have classes, right? And so it's not like every single engine looks unique from one another. So the idea of there being another engine that looks like Donald and Douglas is totally feasible because, there were 100 of them, 300.
Anyways, what's your number 2, Lemmy?
So my number 2 is Tobys Discovery. And this is another example of an episode that really just, there were parts of it that really freaked me out as a kid, even though they weren't, the parts I'm talking about weren't supposed to be scary. Toby's scared face really just scared me a lot. I had
Toby's
to look away.
scariest face is actually in Horrid Lorries, when he's like, Toodle! Now that's the scary picture.
That one, I don't think scared me as much. It was still a little spooky, but his main scared face was really the one that scared me. And Bertram's face terrified me. And seeing Bertram, because he was hiding behind that building the whole time, and then the way he was lit, it was just so scary. And I had never seen Grandpuff before then, so I had seen Smudger's face for the first time, and seeing it on Bertram, it just freaked me out.
That was how I first saw Smudger's face too, because I didn't have I don't know if it was Rusty the Rescue that really was on or whatever, but yeah, that would have been my first exposure to Smudger's face too.
But the reason I love it so much is, I mean, just think about it. There's nothing creepier than revealing that there's this old railway that once existed that's been abandoned. And you even show parts of the railway, and you show, the abandoned lines, and you said it was run by the little engines. And it's the way they talk about it, it's something happened there. It's what? And it's who are these little engines? Are some of them on the Scarloey Railway now? Or are these different little engines? It's, the fact that they just told us this, without any warning. It's oh yeah, by the way, there's this little railway that once existed. And now
hold on, rewind, tell us a little more. And not to mention, they don't tell us a darn thing about Bertram besides that he's very brave.
Yeah, it's really, there's so many gaps in this episode. It's Bertram is obviously from this old railway, right? But what is this railway? You could say maybe it's the Mid-Sodor or something.
Who are you?
Yeah, it's exactly. I look at him and I'm just he knows what the story is, but he doesn't tell us. We never hear it. He never explains.
I know that face. He's hiding something.
It's just I mean, imagine if the real story is he killed all the other engines or something. That's where the old warrior story comes from.
He's very brave because he had the guts to do it.
That would be so creepy. I think what's much more likely is that something went down on that railway. Either it could have just closed.
Imagine the mine collapsed or something.
Maybe something supernatural, where just the
maybe it's linked to that curse.
Yeah, some curse happened and the engines something happened to them. And Bertram's the only survivor and he hasn't opened up about it because it's so traumatic. It's just that's the great thing about it. It leaves you room to theorize. You think about it and it's such great fodder for these kind of creepy supernatural thoughts where you just see those shots of the old narrow gauge line with little trucks scattered places and stuff there, and it's just so creepy. I just looking at that gives me chills. It's oh, that's so weird to see. So I mean, I really would love to know the story behind that, and it's just it's this whole part of the island's history that they just drop on us in one episode and never talk about again. You could do a whole special revealing the deep, dark secrets of the past of this old narrow gauge line.
That leaves the door wide open. You pretty much got a character to run with. The door's open. Besides that, he's very brave, and that you can figure out what tragedy or rare occurrence happened here. And continuing with the theme of this bizarre curse that seems to have hit Sodor, my number 2 is Rusty and the Boulder. And we already kind of talked about this a little bit. I'm going to be a bit short on this one. But, yeah, I mean, no music, just giant freaky boulder with Gordon's face on it. And I don't know how they came up with this episode. I hope it didn't involve drugs or anything. No offense to the crew. Love this show. But, I mean, I don't know what they were thinking, but this is terrifying. And, yeah, Little Diesel versus Rock.
It's like a horror movie mixed with a disaster movie. It's like really... Right? It's really interesting. Yeah. It's like...
And that final shot where you see Boulder looking up on the mountain, and he's like... looks up where it once stood, proud and confident or whatever. It's like...
I love those, really melancholy...
When did we start considering the deep philosophy of a rock?
I know, right? It's like, the thing is, like, I love those deep melancholic themes of just, like, maybe Boulder's the victim in all this, you know? Maybe he's just the victim of a curse, or the victim of, like, is it possible that if we can imagine that trains are alive, and that rolling stock is alive, and buses are alive, maybe a rock is alive too, and maybe he's not happy with the situation he's in. Maybe he's been moved from his home, and he just wants to go back there.
The monster is the victim. This is a Godzilla movie if I've ever seen one.
It's really a cool idea. I mean, it's just like, I love that we even see Boulder's perspective, because it's like, that really adds so much depth to this, where it's like, I mean, they were really pushing the envelope by what they would put a face on, but it's really, I love that the show is like kind of acknowledging the weirdness of putting faces on trains, and that they were like, well, how far can we go with this? Why can't we put a face on the Boulder? But they were careful about it, right? They didn't just have him go out and talk, right? But at the same time, it's like cracks are starting to form in the metaphor, and it's like, well, maybe this can talk, and maybe this can talk. And Rusty is the first one to see it. Rusty's so observant and so focused that he notices this, and he's like, Is there something up with that Boulder?
It's so fitting for his character, too, because he's like the maintenance diesel. Like,
yeah,
he's the first to get this thing.
Yeah, he probably goes here every single day and makes sure that all that quarry walls are safe and everything. And he knows every little bit of that line. He knows every pebble, every rock, every boulder. And so, of course, Rusty's going to be the one to notice this. And, of course, everybody else looks at him like he's crazy because nobody has his level of intimate knowledge with the railway like he does. So it's perfect for him. It's a great Rusty story. And it's not so much, I think, that he's like he's kind of a... I don't think that Rusty's really supernatural in the way he thinks. I think he's actually probably
he's
pretty...
practical, really.
Yeah.
I can see Rusty as being one of the ones who might be less likely to believe in ghosts, but this might be something that challenges that, where he's like,
yeah, exactly. Right, so my number 1 is Scaredy Engines. I really love
Okay,
that episode.
I think every episode now, I think there's been at least one occasion where I'm like, really?
Yeah, no, I think so. That's why I love that we reveal these to each other in real time, because it's like, that's so much more interesting. This episode is like one of my favorite Duck episodes, because I think this is the best episode I can think of if I want to describe how I see Duck and Thomas's relationship. Because I see Duck as, like, Thomas is Percy's best friend, but Duck is kind of a better friend than Thomas is to Percy. Duck has always been there for Percy. Think about it. I mean, he basically liberated Percy, and Duck takes charge, and that's the first thing Duck did when he arrived. They've spent other occasions together, like All at Sea, and I think a few other stories. Diesel Does It Again is another story where Percy and Duck are working together. So it seems to me like Percy and Duck have a pretty close relationship. They're good friends. I think Duck, from the outside, looks at Thomas and Percy's friendship and is probably frustrated that Thomas treats Percy the way that he does. He gets so caught up in his own ego that he's inconsiderate towards Percy, and he makes fun of him when he really shouldn't and should just be considerate. So this is Duck's chance to kind of... He can't change who Percy is friends with. He can't change who Percy spends his time with, but he can teach Thomas a lesson. He can tell Thomas, hey, you're not as great as you think you are. Cut Percy some slack, right? So he engineers the situation in such a way that Thomas is left there all alone, and he's like, come on, Percy, let's go see the fireworks. And so Duck is actually a good friend, gets Percy out of that environment because he knows he's scared, and leaves Thomas there so that he can get a taste of his own medicine. And so then Duck and Percy go to see the fireworks, but then Percy, and this is the part of the episode that really helps to demonstrate Percy's personality as well. Because now Percy feels bad for Thomas. Even though Thomas was a huge jerk earlier and criticized him and said that, he had no reason to be afraid, Percy still feels bad for him because he empathizes, right? Unlike Thomas, Percy can see, well, if I'm going to be scared of the smelters, Thomas is going to be scared too. I'm going to go after him, right? So he does.
It leads to a pretty heartwarming ending, honestly.
Yeah, it's really heartwarming, and it shows, Percy accepts Thomas and all of his faults, which Duck, I'm sure, isn't too keen on, because he's like, Percy, he doesn't treat you well. He's not a very good friend, right? Thomas has a good heart deep down, but he's really not been very kind to you today. I don't see why you should go after him and make sure that he's all right, because Thomas will be fine. Sure, maybe he's terrified, but he kind of deserves it after what he did to you, right? So Duck is looking at it that way in terms of justice, but Percy is just purely looking at it in terms of empathy. He's worried that Thomas is scared. Nothing else matters. He goes after his friend, and the two of them reconcile. And I think this is one of the best ever episodes for all three of those relationships.
I agree completely. It pretty much nails all the characters in one episode. Alright, now, let's go ahead and get into my number one, Ghost Train. I mean, that already sounds like a name you'd hear from an old urban story you'd hear at this town of 30 years ago, there was this ghost train roaming around. Alright, so, you might be thinking, why ghost train? I mean, there's no proven supernatural element in this episode. It's mostly just a kind of an incident where Percy gets covered in flour and then tries to scare Thomas. What's so special about this? Well, it's all the little things really that add up about it. First off, let me start with just the beginning. The best sequence in this whole episode is literally the first 30 seconds. The music...
I figured you were going to say that.
Yeah, I really do. But first off, this is the first time they ever did something scary, and it literally... The music sounds right out of a horror movie, by the way. I love the lore they create at the very beginning of the episode. Where they, even though they say it's a pretend ghost story, and in some versions pretend on television, I don't know, you maybe twist that around a little bit. Maybe it's maybe they believe it, maybe they don't, but just the way they set up, that line at the very end, not only do, okay, first off, visuals, great, amazing, I've said that enough freaking times in this, but that final line, and every year on the date of the accident, it runs again as a warning to others, plunging into the gap, shrieking like a lost soul. That line is better than any other line in a spooky-themed episode. I'm going to say it right now.
Really?
And
you think so?
I do. I really do. The dynamic between Thomas, Percy, and Toby is great, too, because what you already said about the other three, well, it's Thomas and Percy with Duck, I pretty much can say the same pretty much goes here. I mean, it pretty much nails Thomas and Percy's friendship, but also how Toby acts. He's not afraid to give someone their comeuppance.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
He's just gonna play along. And as much I will praise Season 5 till the cows come home, I think this is the scariest episode in terms of a visual aesthetic. There's something about Season 2 where everything just feels like it blends together very well. Season 2 already kind of feels like it has a very dirty aesthetic to it. This one, I mean, well, for one thing, also this was shot in the 80s, so it already can really get the 80s horror movie vibe going, but I think it has probably the scariest song in Thomas history, the creepiest visuals, and it feels like a very Thomas Halloween story. It doesn't really jump out to something really extreme. It feels like the most natural direction you could take it, but it's not a bad thing. I mean, it's just there in the title. Ghost Train. But
it's really fascinating, your perspective on this, because for me it's when I think of Thomas Halloween stories, I think of the ones in I just think of say some of those shots from Duncan Gets Spooked where there's wide open dark skies, and there's just there's music that's really quite eerie, right? The music at the beginning of Ghost Train is more like Jaws type music, whereas the music from in Season 5 I look at more it's just eerie, it's creepy, it kind of makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck, where it's
it's a lot more subtle, where this one's a lot more in your face. But with you might be noticing a trend where with me, a lot of times my number one seem like they're less is more. But for me, there's something about this episode, the look and the feel. That shot of Percy passing the windmill at night, this one hits me in all the right spots, and I love this episode to death. It's my favorite.
Yeah, no, I really do. It is a great episode. So I think we've covered all we wanted to cover. I've been Master of the Lemons.
And I've been Multi-Green-Thunder. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. Thanks for watching.
It is the Monster Mash from my laboratory in the castle.